Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show and classify the rocks that I found near my vicinity. So this is the first rock that I will show to you. This rock is one of my favorites because as you can clearly see, there are crystals growing on the rock. It is more prominent on the upper side of this rock. Let me show you. As you can see, there are uniformly growing crystals on the top of this rock. Moreover, they are very hard and strong. So that makes me lead to the conclusion that it is a quartzite rock. Now we will move on to the next rock. First, let me show you its appearance. I am not really sure on what type of rock this is, but based on its appearance and texture, I can conclude that it is maybe a marble. Moving on to the next rock, we have a very simple yet strangely beautiful rock. This rock is pretty white and relatively smooth. It is also much softer compared to the other rocks that I found. It chips very easily and it turns into grained powder. Therefore, I conclude that it is maybe a dolomite rock. Now let's move on to this rock. This rock is pretty much similar to the other one. It is relatively soft and chips very easily. But yet, it looks strangely different from the other one. As based on the pictures, I can conclude that this rock is maybe a gypsum rock. Moving on, I group these rocks into one because these three rocks have very similar characteristics. As we can see, their looks pretty much fit to the description of limestone. Therefore, I conclude that these three rocks are limestone rocks. Moving on to this next rock. As you can see, there are circular patterns of different colors on this rock, which makes me think that it is a sedimentary type of rock. Based on the pictures that I have seen, I think that this rock is maybe a sandstone. Moving on to these two rocks. These two rocks are very similar. They are very reddish in color but not uniform throughout the whole rock. Therefore, I think that it's maybe red granite mixed with other types of minerals within this rock. Now let's move on to these two rocks. These two rocks are very beautiful, but I am not sure on what type of rocks they really are. But based on the pictures that I got from the internet, I can conclude that they are river agates. Now let's move on to the next rock. This rock is pretty easy to identify. By basing on its looks and features, I can easily conclude that this rock is a shale. Moving on, this rock is also pretty easy to identify. Basing on its looks and features, this rock is clearly a schist. It is a very beautiful type of rock. So moving on, this next rock is also pretty easy to identify. By basing on its looks, features, and texture, I can clearly conclude that this rock is also a shale. This rock may look very different from the previous one, but I also think that this one is a shale. Looking closely, its features and characteristics clearly fit that of a shale, so I think that it is really a shale. This next rock is pretty hard to identify. I had looked for countless sources and searched for many times, but I had still no clue on what this type of rock is. The closest guess that I had is that it is a mixture of two types of granite, namely black and white granite. Moving on to these two rocks. These two rocks are very easy to identify. Based on their looks and features, I can easily conclude that these two rocks are a type of shale with yellowish color. This next rock is also easy to identify. By looking closely at it, we can see that the rock is composed of mineral grains easily seen with a low power hand lens. Thus, I can conclude easily that this rock is also a schist. Moving on to the next rock, this rock is also easy to identify. Just by looking at it, I can easily conclude that this rock is a type of red granite. This next rock is also easily identifiable just by looking at it. Just by looking closely, we can see that it is a fine-grained metamorphic rock. It is also separated into thin sheets with parallel smooth surfaces. Therefore, it could be easily said that this rock is a slate. Moving on, these two rocks look fairly simple compared to the other ones. But in reality, it is not a simple rock at all. By looking closely at its features and characteristics, we can clearly conclude that these two rocks are a type of gabbro. Moving on, this type of rock looks also fairly simple, but it is not a simple rock. By looking closely at its features and characteristics, I can conclude that this rock is a type of pumice stone. Moving on to this next rock, I had a fairly difficult time on guessing on what type of rock this is. But by looking at its features and characteristics and similar pictures on the internet, I could clearly conclude that this rock is a scoria. Let's move on to this rock. I had also trouble finding out on what type of rock this is. But by looking more closely at its features and characteristics, and for similar pictures in the internet, I could clearly conclude that this rock is a type of blackish brown type of basalt. Moving on to the next rock. This rock is similar to one of the previous types of rock that I've shown. By looking more closely, we could clearly see that this type of rock is similar to a marble. Therefore, I can conclude that this rock is a piece of marble. This next rock is a fascinating rock. It is a rock jet black in color. Based on its features and characteristics, I can conclude that this rock is a type of bituminous coal. Now, let's move on to the next rock. This rock is easily identifiable just by looking at its features and characteristics. By looking more closely at it, we could clearly see that it is a type of diorite. And now for our final rock. This rock is also easily identifiable. We could clearly see the layers, which means that it is a sedimentary rock. By looking more closely, I could easily conclude that this rock is another type of shale. And that's all. I hope you enjoyed my video, just as I enjoyed finding and classifying these rocks into different types. Thank you and goodbye!